LHBS. Uncomfortable Talks.
My name is Matthias Abel. I'm here with my two partners tonight. They're sitting over there. One's taking photos is Marc, and behind him is the other Matthias. So that's the three of us. And we were invited to give this fifth uncomfortable talk here through kind invitation of the folks from LHBS, Joanna and Stefan, which we are very grateful for. And the basic question, the first thing everyone asks us is, so what do you guys do, basically? What do you do? What do you do? What's your pitch? What's your elevator pitch? Pitch it, do it. Tell me. So I try to sort of just sum it up very quickly in one chart, because at our heart we are a sweet spot company. We're three people, we're combining sort of different fields, different expertise, different backgrounds, and what we are really interested in is kind of these areas, these sweet spots that you probably know from like gazillions of charts in marketing and branding, but that's still really interesting. What happens if you put complementary people together, or put interdisciplinary projects together, and what happens in these areas? So that's kind of our philosophy, working around these sweet spots. Apparently we are currently a company without a name, really without an identity, although we're not hackers. But it puts them in kind of a different situation. That's kind of how we got to meet LHBS. They've been in a sort of ahead from us, founding a company, having a name already, having credit cards and stuff like this. We don't have credit cards yet, which is sometimes difficult to book flights and stuff. But we are right now in the process of developing all of this. And we, as Jeff, we're launching a business, and I always wanted to put in this kind of launching rocket. I've never done it before, but now I did, so I'm pretty glad about this. And we're heavily working on creating our new business, setting up the brand, and obviously, as we're being planners and kind of thinkers of all sorts, it's very difficult to figure out the brand, so we might, as we don't have a name, turn to crowdsourcing eventually. I actually don't hope so, because some weird things obviously also happen when you turn to crowdsourcing, like really strange designs for bottles or something. And also one thing is we're Germans. Yeah, we three are Germans, and as Germans, everything has to be in order. If it's in a sauna or anywhere else, there's rules, and of course it has to be perfect. Yeah, we need to have the perfect brand. We need to have the perfect positioning, and a lot of perfect discussions around that. So I'm really sorry about that. I'm afraid we cannot jump out from our culture and from our backgrounds. And if this attitude, as your lecture instructed today, should become too annoying, please do hit us hard at any time during our untalk, and I think that's the corresponding hashtag you could use if you fancy to share something on Twitter. Unfortunately, these days, being a German, a good German especially, puts in some kind of a trouble, since the demand for perfect stuff is in fact declining. And today, companies are basically hiding away in their ivory towers, designing possibly the perfect whatever, will lose in our opinion. So, why will they lose? You see this little ivory tower yearning for this perfection? Because they will die from a long time to market and irrelevancy. I hope we will not share this fate, because we will never find a name. So that's why we're working hard on it. And on the other hand, today companies who live on the streets, who kind of find insights and relevance to people, to clients, that like to share this vision of a brand or of a product, they will win, because they bring out new ideas and do something new apart from classical marketing or products that they just push to the market. Unfortunately, and that's kind of a motivation for us, at the same time, only a few of these companies today are German companies, and this is sort of a little mission statement that we have to we need to change this, basically. To give you a little overview of what to expect from this talk, from this uncomfortable talk tonight, is we've kind of maneuvered through that already, and then we'd like to give a little context and basically a recap of previous untalks. We've been looking into, following obviously what you guys have put together here, and what it means for our untalk, which is I think not the number 6 but the number 5, but we will just move on. And kind of the theme is the age of transition. That's what we'd like to basically bounce some ideas with you tonight and discuss in the form of probably very uncomfortable Q&A in the end. So, what is our untalk all about? You want to know? so do we actually. In short, we would like to share and bounce some ideas with you on the theme of transitions. And to sort of make it a little bit more tangible for you, we'll start with a little example. And example, or transition number one is that who thought that we would actually trade competition in favor of collaboration? That actually goes directly to one of the week notes that we receive and read every day from LHBS that I think Joanna wrote this time. And she said, basically, that you didn't grow up in sort of a business surrounding where you share stuff or where you open up. It was rather defined by competition. And suddenly, like 2011, today, 21st century, whatever the reason may be, this has changed. There's more openness and collaboration. That's kind of defining most of the business. And just as a side remark, this is also not how we three grew up either, with this kind of sharing or openness attitude. A second transition that I quickly like to go through with you is who thought that Americans would fall in love with bikes and move from car-centric to bike or pedestrian-centric environments. But environments, this is, could you imagine, or could you have imagined a couple of years ago, bike lanes around Times Square? I think people would have said, yeah, you must be crazy, it's never going to happen. Yeah, but it happened. Yeah, it happened, and before on the left-hand side and after is there's much more pedestrian areas and dedicated spaces for bikes, something that would have been unthinkable. And like areas that were defined through traffic jams have almost turned into piazzas where people can mingle and sit around and have their coffee latte, decaf eventually, with soy milk. But what does it mean? If cars are continuously being banned from bigger cities, what does it mean, or does it change the concept of businesses or designing living space and enabling mobility, especially if you're a car brand? We talked initially about BMW, I'd like to kind of dive into here. What does it mean? You're selling cars and putting every 3 or 4 years new car ranges out. And just a little side note, we congratulate BMW for breaking all the records, even though there has been a big, or still is an economic crisis. But by the way, how are your cars that come out from BMW shape the future of mobility? On another side note, we like to congratulate companies like Deutsche Bahn, who introduced forward-thinking mobility services and moved from being a train operator to mobility provider with services like Call a Bike, DB Car Sharing or Flinkster. And also Daimler, who founded a dedicated section that's called Daimler Business Innovation, which is not out of marketing reasons, but it's out of creating new businesses, and they came up with a great new concept called Car2Go. It has been meanwhile released in a couple of cities worldwide. So thanks for anticipating to these companies that our world is changing. And BMW, just like I said, success breeds also failure. You could probably ask Nokia, a very successful company that kind of missed changes in the market and in consumer demands, and now isn't leading in all positions anymore. And when we looked at the previous Untalks, we also found that they all have something in common because they were all about changes and transitions. So when we look back, we had the first one, I think, Stefan Stoiber, then we had Third Wave coming along, Marcus Brown, Neil Perkin. Stefan talked about transitions in the way we market, communicate and advertise. The Third Wave talked about transitions in the way we work, live and interact with new media and new technologies. Marcus Brown talked about transitions in the way we perceive and use the web, and Neil Perkin talked about transitions in the way we plan and build business or marketing strategies. So our thesis for the Untalk tonight is basically that today most of innovation is held back. I'm going to ask why. Why is it? Why is it so? We think it's because as long as your business is running smoothly, everything is fine, and you're selling a lot of cars or whatever kind of products, innovation is only seen as one thing, and that's a source of irritation. Because obviously it is more convenient not to change when you know the amounts roll in and you sell more and more of that stuff, even though there's a crisis. And so when it comes to this whole topic of innovation and bringing up new stuff, we have been discussing a lot about what's kind of steering innovation and what's not, and we've come up with two archetypes. These are very kind of simplistic archetypes, obviously. So the one archetype is the visionaries on the one hand, and on the other hand you'd have the copycats. And both are driven by different sentiments. So The one would be courage, as we call it, and the other is fear. The thing is, neither one we would say this is better or the other is worse, because both create innovation, but they have different reasons behind it, different motivations. And these motivations are on one hand for the visionaries, like they want impact, they want to create something, they want to do something, they want to change something. And for the copycats, it's more sort of a pressure. Like if Adidas or Reebok or whoever sees that Nike comes up with this great Nike Plus thing, suddenly there's a pressure situation that you also have to come up with a product because, oh, we missed that consumers have this kind of needs and this is a great product. But still, both can create innovation. And then the thing is, most organizations only change when they're really being put under big pressure. So like, if you're between these two tanks, you might eventually at some stage think, well, I guess it should be about time to change this really uncomfortable situation. And our assumption is about this whole pressure and motivations that this applies to basically all forms of social entities. So you can start from something like personal relationships. So if you're, for example, in a relationship, woman, man, 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 woman, woman, whatever, and something really bothers you, you might only say it until it really, really bothers you. Or in communities, if something comes up, if there's a conflict or whatever, there needs to be some sort of a pressure for you that you cannot stand it anymore and articulate something. You find the same phenomenon in cultures. You find it in businesses, that there are suddenly pressures coming up, like new products or competitors doing this and that, and also in governments. So how can we understand this behavior better? This is kind of the transitional part where I'd like to dip into this age of transition. And a few assumptions that we have that explain kind of our thinking right now around this project. Number one is that we live obviously in a time where changes in almost all fields of life are occurring much quicker than in the past. We're not saying change is a new thing, it has always been there, but the cycles of change are happening much, much quicker. B is that we believe that these changes will even speed up in the future. It will not stay the way they are changing right now. And that this age of transition that we've come up with is sort of just a metaphor to understand and explore these changes more deeply, more widely. And the age of transition can only be a snapshot that happens at one moment in time where we look at things, where we describe things, and these changes will have to be revised in the future, and then again in the future, and see what happened. And these transitions are never kind of final. They will never be from this to that. There will always be another evolutionary step that will be right ahead. And it's kind of our task to anticipate what changes could come up next. And this whole thing that we're thinking about right now will be a collaborative project that will grow with your participation, basically, because we are obviously not capable of doing this on ourselves. So we've put together a couple of fields, as discussed earlier, or introduced earlier, in which we see these transitions taking place. And this is just a few examples. I think when you kind of give it a thought, a lot more feeds will come up where you see transitions or changes happening, where you see something is developing in a certain area and might turn out here or there. So one thing about governments is we have a transition from, especially this is a German topic I think, from nuclear necessity called to renewable energy. So when we look back a couple of years ago, we had our Chancellor Angela Merkel really hang out with all the big energy companies in Germany and doing some kind of partnership or whatever kind of stuff you want to call it, which wasn't accepted in the society until a certain pressure arose that people just didn't want to have nuclear power in Germany, and they had to change their politics again. So that's one example in governments. Another example is we're seeing kind of the transition from a representative democracy that's basically the Bundestag or whatever kind of constitutional form to a participatory democracy where people are being more involved, more than just being in the ballot or making a cross, because you can put in e-petitions in Germany, for example, through a website. When enough people kind of vote for this petition, it will be suggested to the Bundestag to kind of change a law, for example. Then, in terms of governments, we also see power shifts from top-bottom to bottom-top societies. If you think about all these developments in the last months and years happening in the Arab countries, and also obviously very, very very current is what happens in England, is also kind of a power shift or an articulation that some people are unhappy with what's happening, apart from those looters who would just want to cause trouble or destroy things. But there's really a lot of things, not only in Arab cultures or countries happening, it's also happening in Western countries. And the same thing kind of took place in France, in the banlieues, like a couple of years ago as well. When we look at businesses or brands, marketing particularly, we have a transition that comes from these ivory towers to openness and collaboration, perfectly represented by kind of an ivory tower being a luxury brand, and openness in terms of Starbucks also being a very iconic brand that opened up to platforms, for example. And also, when we look at cultures, a really huge shift that's happening is obviously from privacy to public and sharing. And what represents it best for us is like, especially in German, probably in Austria to a degree as well, that you kind of originally wanted to separate where you live and kind of not anyone have look at what you do in your garden or in your house, and today you put all the photos on Facebook of parties or whatever, and sharing has become sort of a commodity or living in public. So these are just a few examples in these three fields. I think there's a lot more. For example, when you look at Stuttgart 21, the discussions, the argue, the fight, the struggle about whether to build this train station or not is a classic example where the top-down or representative democracies have failed in involving the citizens, and there will, through this pressure, there will need to be solutions for the future, how politicians or parties or governments in Germany or anywhere else will have to find other ways to interact and open up to the citizens. And in businesses, I talked about the brands, but another example, for example, is when we stick to the car manufacturers example, is like, I think BMW and Daimler there, they've collaborated on building certain parts of their cars which are not so super secret or special, but they can save costs, and it would also have been unthinkable like 5 years ago or something. And cultures that we see, basically, this privacy to sharing culture phenomenon is one thing, and I think there are a lot of more examples that can and should be explored. So the big question for us is obviously how can we support all these social entities, the individuals, the communities, the businesses or governments to foster these insights. And what we've tried to do is basically sort of put together different things that we find useful to consider in order to foster these insights. So the first thing basically is that we think one should find a purpose of what you do and stick with it. Be it if you're a brand or if you are a party, a political party or any kind of other organization, then build your organization or your brand around this purpose and invite people in to participate, be it through if we think about a political example, Stuttgart 21, or be through participating, like an example of what Starbucks did, get people in, obviously people that you especially like to have involved, and no looters, for example, probably, when it comes to brands. And be broad. Explore the boundaries of your business, because businesses are changing pretty quick, and while you're in a train operator in the one moment, a couple of years later you might turn out being a mobility provider, kind of offering car services, fleet services, or bikes, or shared rides, or whatever. And what's very essential is that you have to sort of open up, and especially to complementary cultures that can be totally different to what makes or defines your culture in a business or in a party or whatever. Open up, because it will always sort of, this complementary will always enrich you and bring you different perspectives of what could be done or how problems could be solved. And obviously get involved. Don't just steer your boat and go straight ahead. Start up conversations, join conversations about where your category or your market is going to. Because it will, in the least cases, be constantly the same over a course of time. There's always change around the next corner. And create experiences. Experience not only for brands, it's what we kind of experience for a party. How can a party or leaders or chancellors or any kind of governments give people, citizens, a better experience of how they are being a citizen, or how they can participate in democracies. And it's always about, one thing is what's written in your kind of party program, or in your brand manifesto, or in your advertising. The whole other different story is what you actually put into action. What a party does, what kind of moves you do in politics, or with your brand, or with your business. And obviously, know your category, and know when you have to leave it. This applies especially to businesses, obviously. If you think of, when we go back to the barn example, if they would have stick to sort of only we're a train provider and not opening up to other categories, they probably would not be as successful and widely accepted as they are right now. And also, don't rely too much and stick too much with what made you possible in the past. Because it might not make you successful in the future. Just things changed too quickly. And rely on capabilities in terms of soft factors rather than on solutions. Because someone somewhere else, be it politician or another brand or business or whatever, might already, or not might, will definitely be developing another solution, another method, or another attitude that you totally have not considered or in mind. And then take risks and fail if you must, because if you don't fail, it's our opinion, you just were not brave enough to try some new things out. And embrace change, because we think the age that we live in right now is the most interesting, and there's a lot of potentials and things to explore. And do not feel too comfortable, because wherever you are, there is places and surroundings that change quickly. So being comfortable probably most of the time is not the best option. So I've been pretty quick for this presentation, which I'm very surprised actually. Probably because I didn't rehearse it beforehand. That's why I kind of look questioning to my two partners, because maybe eventually I'm hoping that you have a couple of aspects that I kind of went over too quickly, and would like to sort of play the ball over to you so I can switch to the thank you chart already. Would you like to come to the front eventually?
No, that's what I tried to avoid. That's why I was sitting in the back.
Nice.
What did you get out of this? It was pretty quick, I know. But what if you did like learn or hear anything new? What was that? Oh wow. Okay. So what this talk is about is that we think that change is happening and it's speeding up. Okay? So if you're a business, that must have implications on how you do your business, right? Do we agree on that? Mm-hmm. Okay. So maybe we can get back to the... No, I do the...
Please do.
The learnings again, maybe.
I was asking for it.
Oh,
that's all right.
I'm so grateful you did this. Because I really didn't want it to add too much wine. Find purpose. I think that's like one of the most important things. You had some talks that were about the digital age and of course about that social media stuff. I think the biggest problems that companies have is if you do not have a purpose as a company, don't go to social media. Social media is not for campaigning. Social media is for people to follow the same purpose you are following. Do you get what I say? If I have a vision, there is a Danish energy company. It's called Drang. I'm sorry, they call it that way. They're the biggest like blokes in Denmark, and they were the biggest CO2 providers in their country, which is a bad thing. So they went for a campaign which that we're the biggest CO2 providers and we're really sorry for that, but we want to change. And the campaign was tremendously successful. Then somebody said, what happened if we really changed? If it was not just a campaign, but a real purpose? What if we went for clean energy, no nuclear energy, out of coal, which is their like most important source of energy, to windcraft, water, stuff like that. And they made that a purpose and said, We may be the biggest CO2 polluter right now, but we're the first to get on the way to a better future. And we start now and we have proof. We build wind parks, we build water energy devices, stuff like that, and they really invested a lot of money in research and other aspects of that energy shift away from those traditional sources to new sources, renewable sources. Can you follow me? They had a purpose. It's easy to go to social media if you have a purpose. If people want to buy into what you do. Normally, brands go there, they think in campaigns. They're really afraid that people will not like what they write about, since people have a voice in social media. Shitstorm, that's like the worst thing that can happen. If you have a purpose, it won't. It won't happen. It won't happen because once you have a purpose, there will be like negative opinions, but they're going to be constructive in a way. There may be people disagreeing with you, but that's a conversation you want to have. Because if you have a purpose, you want to see different aspects of the story. So, if you, I don't know, I'm sure a lot of you are from advertising. Are you? No? Communication? No? Consulting? Yeah? Thank you. I think it's really hard if you get these briefs saying, can you do a social media campaign for us? We want to do this Facebook thing. We really believe in it. It's got to be huge. We want to go there. We don't have people who know how to write this stuff, but maybe you can do all of that for us. First thing you should say, what's your purpose? Not just your purpose for going into social media, what's your purpose as a company? Because if you don't have one, it's a hard way to go. If you have nothing to say, there's no use in going to social media. If you try to convince people there, they are too intelligent, sorry, they will know. And you get your shitstorm because you deserve it. If you don't have a purpose, don't go there. I think having a purpose is like one of the most important things for a company. And if you see, now we're Germans, if you see Google or if you see Apple, they have a purpose. They know what they want to build. They have a perception, even IBM. They changed their claim. They had this solutions for a small planet. Or then the smart planet thing.
Smart planet.
Yeah, smart planet thing. And they changed it to let's make the planet smarter. That's a purpose. It's not just IBM. It's let us make the planet smarter. That's a purpose. You can be bored by that purpose and not buy into it, then you're not an IBM user, okay? But if you are interested in making that planet smarter, go for it. It's a purpose. I think it's hard to find German companies, I'm sure there are many that I don't know of, that have a real purpose. I mean, we have great companies. We have BMW, we have Mercedes, we have a lot of great stuff. But they're about building the most successful car. Now, if you are into the creation of the most successful car, you might buy into that purpose. But if you're into mobility or something, or into other concepts, you may demand something greater than just building a better car. Can you follow me?